Vicarious liability is based on the principle that a person who controls the work should bear responsibility for acts done in its execution. All the above elements must be present for liability to arise. These are as follows. Liability of master for acts of servant. An employer is liable for the torts committed by his employee while performing duties connected with employment. The principle is based on control and responsibility of the employer. Case law, State of Rajasthan vs. SMT. Vicarious, 1962. Facts: a government jeep driver, while driving the vehicle for official purposes, drove it negligently and knocked down a pedestrian, resulting in death. The act occurred during official working hours and while performing assigned duties. Held: the Supreme Court held that the state was vicariously liable because the driver committed negligence in the course of employment. Compensation was awarded to the legal heirs of the deceased. Course of employment. An act is said to be done in the course of employment when it is performed while carrying out duties assigned by the employer, even if the act is done in a negligent or improper manner. Case law, Century Insurance Co. vs. Northern Ireland Road Transport Board, 1942. Facts: a driver employed by the Transport Board was transferring petrol from a tanker when he lit a cigarette. This caused an explosion which seriously injured the plaintiff standing nearby. Held: the House of Lords held that the employer was liable because the negligent act occurred during the course of employment. The act was connected with the duty assigned to the employee. Acts outside the course of employment. If an employee commits a wrongful act which is entirely outside the scope of his employment, the employer is not vicariously liable. Case law, Beard vs. London General Omnibus Co., 1900. Facts: a bus conductor, who was not authorized to drive the bus, took control of the vehicle and drove it negligently, causing an accident and injury to the plaintiff. Held: the court held that the employer was not liable because the conductor acted outside the scope of his employment. Driving was not part of his assigned duties. Liability of principal for acts of agent. A principal is liable for torts committed by his agent when such acts are done within the scope of authority, whether actual or apparent. Case law, Lloyd vs. Grace Smith & Co., 1912. Facts: a clerk employed by a law firm induced a client to transfer her property to him by abusing his position and authority within the firm. The fraud was committed during office hours. Held: the House of Lords held the firm liable because the clerk acted within his apparent authority. The principal was responsible for the agent's fraudulent act. Liability of partners. All partners are jointly liable for torts committed by any partner in the ordinary course of partnership business. Case law, Hamlin vs. Houston & Co., 1903. Facts: one partner bribed an employee of another firm to obtain confidential information while acting on behalf of the partnership business. Held: the court held that all partners were liable because the wrongful act was committed in the course of partnership business and for its benefit. Liability of state for acts of its servants. The state may be held vicariously liable for torts committed by its employees while performing non-sovereign functions. Case law, Kasturi Lal vs. State of Uttar Pradesh, 1965. Facts: gold seized by the police from the plaintiff was kept in custody. Due to negligence, a police constable misappropriated the gold and fled. Held: the Supreme Court held that the state was not liable because the act was committed during the exercise of sovereign functions of the police. Exceptions to vicarious liability. The employer or principal is not liable when the act is done outside the course of employment. The act is purely personal in nature. The act is done in exercise of sovereign functions. Conclusion. Vicarious liability is an important doctrine in the law of torts. It ensures that victims are compensated by persons who have control over the wrongdoer and are in a better position to pay. The principle promotes social justice and accountability in employer-employee and similar relationships.